Hello, welcome to Wellness and Wisdom Podcast with me, Dr. Nadu Tuakli. Here you can expect to hear conversations about everything women over 40 care about, from optimal wellness and peak performance, from intimacy to travel and finances and more. I will be speaking to interesting women and sometimes men in an effort to educate and motivate you to live your best life. We are in this together. If you want to find out more, please head over to my website, drtuakli.com, or subscribe to my blog. You can also read my book, Sex, Sanity, and Sleep. Talk to you soon. Hello, this is Dr. Nadu Tuakli. Let's get into the good stuff. Pop the cork. This is my maiden voyage, no pun intended. And I have so much in store for you today, lots and lots. We're going to talk about planning the way forward. What would you do if you could do anything in the world? Well, we are going to talk about self-improvement and putting yourself first. My first podcast is all about women's empowerment, and all my podcasts will be about this subject. I truly believe there's nothing more empowering for a woman than having her hormones balanced. Did you know that by 2030, the population of menopausal and postmenopausal women is projected to increase to 1.2 billion worldwide? It's a huge demographic, yet menopause is such a neglected topic. Today, I'm launching my podcast with a phenomenal doctor who has been working in women's health for decades. She is a great teacher and has hundreds of YouTube videos and podcasts on menopause. So it's so fitting to have her here as my first podcast interviewee, since menopause is my favorite subject, and I just republished my book, Sex, Sanity, and Sleep. It is fun to talk with someone else who is as excited about menopause as me. Today, we're going to try to break down the myths and fears that women have regarding HRT, otherwise known as hormone replacement therapy. We both agree that women must seek out information on HRT before denying themselves the major health benefits of it. My guest exemplifies what this podcast is all about. She emanates the joie de vivre like an Energizer bunny. She reinvented herself after retiring from her day job. She's all about wellness and wisdom. And she, like me, never gets tired of talking about the importance of menopause. Education is the key, and this lady is a great educator. So without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to present Dr. Barbie Taylor, otherwise known as the Menopause Barbie or Menopause Taylor. She's a retired gynecologist and has a law degree and master's in business. We have so much to talk about, and she has so much information to share. She doesn't know it yet, but this probably will be a 4-part series, since issues like sex after 40 and mood swings alone could be a whole podcast on their own. Dr. Taylor can help you customize your life plan and answer all your HRT questions. We will be talking a little bit about her customized consultations a little bit later. Dr. Barbie Taylor, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I love doing this kind of thing. So thank you.
So let's do this.
Okay, let's go.
Why do you say illusion is not the basis for solution? Should every woman consider taking HRT?
I don't think anything is right for all women. I just don't see women as robots. I think the key to anything, and especially menopause, is tailoring everything to the individual. We just are not all the same. We don't have the same backgrounds. We don't have the same wishes, desires, and we don't have the same medical situation. So I think the key is all women need the education. That is a given. And the earlier the better. My dream is for all women to get an education on menopause in their 20s, because it will help shape how they run their lives for the rest of their lives. But when it comes to menopause management, I think we're all very different, with all sorts of reasons for making us feel differently about what we do to manage our menopause. But I think it's important to have the education so that you know what each of your options can do and what each of your options cannot do. And that is probably what I find most lacking for women. They have no idea about the trade-offs, meaning everything has some pros and cons, some benefits and risks, some advantages and disadvantages. And in our world of advertising and marketing and sound bites, they don't learn that. They learn that there's a best of something or something's right or wrong. And, those are marketing words. And so I try to teach women all the pros and all the cons of all their options. And, it's information. And then they can do whatever they want with it. And they can use that information and put weights on that information in any way they see fit. But that's really the power of education, in my opinion.
Right. And I agree 100%, because if you don't know something, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Now, one thing that always comes up when you talk about hormone replacement or menopause, and we're going to talk a little bit about menopause zest, because menopause does not need to be all doom and gloom.
Right.
I think people get this, be very afraid of getting older, being menopausal, taking hormones. I mean, there's so much fear out there. As far as hormone replacement, we probably need to go back to the WHI study from 2002. And even though it's been debunked many, many times, it's so old, but its ghost lives on.
True.
Surely by now, women would have figured out that nobody can say, oh, we had X number of people died because they took. But I think the underlying fear when people hear the word hormone is cancer. Many women just don't want to hear about it because they think it's going to cause cancer. What do you tell them?
Well, I go back to basics on everything. I always tell women, go back to basics. You start producing female hormones in puberty. So you're 12? And you then go through 35 or 40 years of your life with your own body producing a bucket of estrogen and progesterone. If you ever get pregnant, that bucket becomes 15 bucket. And then you hit postmenopause when all these same hormones disappear and you start feeling horrible. And when you're feeling horrible, that's usually the first time that a woman has any notion at all to learn anything at all about menopause or these hormones that she's been walking around producing for 35 or 40 years.
Surprise!
Surprise, exactly. And then when they say, well, gosh, HRT, hormone replacement, will cause cancer, I say, wait a minute. If it's going to cause cancer, why didn't it cause cancer when you were producing buckets of it? Why didn't you drop dead when you were pregnant? Testosterone is to men what estrogen is to women. Are men saying that their testosterone is going to cause cancer? Do people who take insulin replacement for diabetes worry about insulin causing cancer? What about people who take thyroid hormone? The bottom line is hormone replacement is hormone replacement. The word replacement is very, very, very telling. You are replacing something that your own body used to produce, and your body produced it because it cannot live without it. So to then go think that your own hormone that your own body produced is going to cause cancer, it's kind of wonky. And see, this is the power of fear. Fear is the most powerful emotion on our planet, and fear paralyzes your brain. The minute someone scares you, you don't have the wherewithal to say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. But when you go back to basics and you think about it that way, you kind of go, oh, yeah, wait a minute. Why was I so afraid? Because that's the power of fear. And so when you know that fear is this powerful, when you know that fear is the greatest marketing tool on earth, you don't fall prey to it because you stop and you use common sense to think through whatever it is that scared you. And most of the time you go, wait a minute, that doesn't really sound logical. And then if you research more, you realize it isn't logical. But the fear paralyzed you to the point where you didn't bother questioning anything or doing any more research or checking anything out. And that's where most women are. They hear one fearful thing and that's the end of the story for them. And I find that to be, I think that robs women of their options and their ability to do what they want to manage their menopause their way, because the fear doesn't allow them to go forward.
It paralyzes them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I had read an article the other day that said that women who were on replacement therapy who had breast cancer actually lived longer than women who had breast cancer without hormone replacement.
It's absolutely true.
So once again, we're in a state where stuff doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
But people allow this to be a driving force for them.
Exactly. Well, all the studies also show that the women who have the lowest rates of breast cancer are the women who've had the most pregnancies. And I just told you that pregnancy is when you have 15 buckets of hormone. So the women who have the lowest rate of breast cancer are the women who have had the highest levels of hormones for the longest periods of time. Again, it doesn't make sense to say those hormones cause breast cancer when those are the women with the lowest rates. Women who can take estrogen all by itself for hormone replacement also decrease their risk for breast cancer. So what really is the culprit behind breast cancer and hormones? First of all, HRT is not even on the list of risk factors for breast cancer, and here everyone's saying it causes it. But what really increases your risk for breast cancer is menstrual cycles, period. The cyclic up and down of estrogen and progesterone is the thing that increases your risk for breast cancer. And there's a formula for this. It's called menstrual life. The more cycles you've had in your lifetime, the higher your risk for breast cancer. It's really, all the risk factors really boil down to that one single thing.
Along with other factors like smoking and obesity and social factors.
Of course.
So let's talk about why someone would even want to take hormone replacement. People tend to focus on the symptoms. Oh, I don't have hot flashes, so I don't have a problem. It's almost like women have to get to a point where they're almost disabled.
Exactly.
They can't sleep. They're sweating all the time. The hot flashes are driving them crazy. And then they say, oh, I think I need hormones. But let's talk about the health benefits, because the health benefits are so much more important than the symptoms. And yet the symptoms are what people focus on the most.
Right. Well, a hot flash never killed anybody, but a heart attack has. And the truth is this, every hormone deficiency on our planet produces a great big list of symptoms that are your body's way of telling you that something's missing. You name any hormone and the deficiency is a bunch of symptoms to get your attention. If you don't replace a hormone deficiency, they all have fatal diseases at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't matter whether it's insulin deficiency, thyroid hormone deficiency, no matter what, any hormone deficiency produces all these symptoms. And if you don't replace the hormone adequately, you will ultimately die of something. With estrogen deficiency, the three fatal diseases are heart attack, osteoporosis and fractures, and Alzheimer's disease. Estrogen is our fountain of youth. It keeps us young on the inside and the outside. When we lose our estrogen, we start aging rapidly on the inside and the outside. Well, we see the outside aging. We start noticing wrinkles and dry skin and all kinds of things that are visible. But what we can't see is that our heart arteries start getting filled with plaque to the point where they become hard. That's where we get the term hardening of the arteries. Our bone starts disappearing. That's where we get osteoporosis and loss of bone mass. And our brain starts shrinking, which is what Alzheimer's is. It's very, very straightforward. It's just that nobody talks about this stuff, and women don't even know that there are diseases associated with menopause. They have no idea that, because if they think if they feel fine, they must be fine. It doesn't work that way. All three of these diseases are silent until deadly. You feel fine and then bam, heart attack. You feel fine and then bam, you fracture your spine or your hip. You feel fine and then bam, you have your first sign of Alzheimer's. That's the way they work. This is what I teach because I think it's way more important to know about these diseases than it is to focus on your symptoms. Your symptoms are a quality of life issue. The diseases are a quality and quantity of life issue. So big difference.
A huge difference. And if only women could see where the hormone balance is actually a quality of life and quantity of life issue, more women would avail themselves of the opportunity. But as you said earlier, the fear, the misinformation, the, oh, I'm not menopausal, I'm not getting old, it's not going to happen to me. That kind of thinking is just not that logical.
Yeah. Well, menopause is the most neglected topic on our planet, even though half of the world's population spends half of their lives in menopause. We are the largest group of people on the planet. We are the biggest group on Earth, but we don't act like it. You know, we should be standing on mountaintops telling everybody that menopause is the greatest thing in the world and that we run the world. You know, it's interesting. Other animals don't have menopause. Mother Nature's plan for animals is birth, reproduction, and death. So the other animals die. But we humans have made so many advances in science and medicine that now we're living twice as long as Mother Nature intended. So what's happening is we're outliving our ovaries, and therefore we're living the second half of our lives with a hormone deficiency. And when you look at it that way, you go, whoa, wait a minute. So it's a bonus that we have menopause. I mean, we should all be going, hallelujah, we're so happy to be here because we're all really supposed to be dead, you know? And so I see menopause as this great, wonderful gift. And I think it's great that we're here, but I think you have to understand that you're up against a hormone deficiency. So you want to make that time a good period of time in your life, not a miserable period of time in your life.
Yeah, I often say to women that at the turn of last century, a woman's life expectancy was 47.
Exactly.
So if you were going to die at 47, you really didn't worry about menopause because it wasn't even a problem. But now, as you said, thanks to modern technology, we are living at least twice that. And so you're asking to live the second half of your life basically in a negative state of negative balance, total deficiency. So you and I have so much in common, and I really enjoy talking with you. Let's say in the same age group, we both physicians, we both love traveling a lot. And I want you to talk a little bit about menopause zest, because I feel like some people think the term menopause is such a downer. I mean, you can't mention it at parties. You can't, it's like, one of my patients told me, she said, well, I don't mention to people that I'm on hormones because, when I get together with my girlfriends, they all look so much worse than me. But menopause is not a diva subject. And we all talking about diva stuff. And if I started talking about menopause, that's such a downer. And like you said, that shouldn't be the case. No. I mean, that should be like, yay.
we should all put menopause before our names. Just I'm Menopause Barbie, menopause. It's like, yay. I mean, so, it's like there's no hiding it. But, it shouldn't be any more silenced or taboo than puberty. Silence is not golden when it comes to menopause. When it comes to menopause, silence is really stupid because we oppress ourselves by being silent about it. If we don't speak up, nothing is going to change. I mean, there is no way the situation for menopause is going to be better for women by being silent. That is not going to happen. If we don't start the movement ourselves for demanding more recognition, more options, more open conversation, then nothing will ever change.
More education.
And this is why I shoot for the educational piece. I don't have a product. I don't have an angle. I don't recommend anything. I don't sell anything. I just educate. I am all about, here's the education. You can use it or refuse it as you please. You can do whatever you want with the education. And I don't gain a thing by how anyone manages their menopause. But this is how my students know that I'm telling them the truth, because there's no, I don't have a stake in the matter. I'm not going to get something if they do it one way or another. This is why they know that they can believe me, because I'm going to tell them the whole truth and the whole story, and then they can do whatever they please. And that is the difference in education versus someone who has a product or an angle or is selling something. I always say there's a fine line between,
take this.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a fine line between ed and ad. Ed being educating and ad being advertising. And nowadays people are surrounded by advertising, but there just isn't much educating out there.
Right. And unfortunately, a lot of the advertising is actually fake information.
Exactly.
It's just, you hear the most bizarre things these days that it's like, and people believe that.
They do.
So here we are, menopausal women, and you say you have nothing to gain if a woman takes menopause takes hormones or doesn't. But actually, we all have to gain because we'll have a whole much happier planet.
True. That's true.
I see some women, and I can't believe they allow themselves to get to that point of frustration or, I talked to a woman one time, she had not slept in 5 years. I'm a sleeper. I just can't imagine not
Yep.
sleeping for 5 years.
I agree. I'm the same
And
way.
I said, what were you thinking? But to be fair to her, she also didn't like going to doctors, and they keep handing her sleep medicines. She'd take the Benadryl, that made her groggy. She was smart enough to realize that most sleeping medicines are going to make her addicted. It's just crazy what happens.
Yeah.
So let's talk about menopause zest, a term that you coined. And we won't call it the second half, but the continuum of our life cycle after menopause.
Well, think about it. Women play a role in society where we are the one on whom everyone leans. So we get into a situation where we're in a relationship, and then we have children, and then we're someone's mother, and then we're someone's wife. And so we identify ourselves by other people. So our identity is largely tied to the roles we play in other people's lives. Most women are someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's this, someone's that. Well, in playing that role, we put ourselves last. So most women are busy taking care of the kids and the house and the husband and the pets and the grass and the plants and the food and you name it. But they aren't saying, here's what I want to do. I'm going to go, travel around the world, or I'm going to go learn a language, or I'm going to go, do my hobby. They aren't in the habit of putting themselves first. Well, menopause comes along, and for most women, that means that, number one, their children leave home, which creates an empty nest. Number two, they're either usually in a relationship that's kind of long-term and not that exciting anymore, or they've already divorced, or they find themselves single. And most women are shaken by this sudden feeling of, well, who am I now? Because suddenly everything by which they identified themselves is gone or different.
Especially if they're retired.
Exactly. And so I have a term called menopausal identity crisis that happens to a lot of women. They literally look in the mirror and think, who am I? What do I do now? And it's because everything that they spent the last 35 or 40 years doing is no longer needs them. They have a need to be needed, and the things that needed them aren't part of their lives anymore. Well, for a lot of women, this is a very disturbing feeling, and they find themselves quite lost. But see, I think it's an indication that it's their turn. Finally, after all this time, putting yourself last and serving other people and not really knowing what you want for yourself, finally, you get to go do whatever you want. And I just think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And if more women saw it that way, menopausal zest is where you pour yourself into something you love, and you just have the thrill of doing what you want, possibly for the first time in your life. And not enough women take advantage of this. I mean, hey, the kids are gone. You don't have to stay home and do their laundry. You don't have to do anything. You can go out and enjoy yourself. And if more women saw it this way, we'd have more women doing, new things like hobbies, more women advancing in the workforce, more women taking on all kinds of things that they never found the time for earlier. Travel, what have you. I just think all of it is such a growth experience. And I think women kind of get groomed not to think about doing these things. And then when their opportunity comes, they almost can't remember what they liked. When I say to women, tell me I'll say, what have you always wanted to do and never found the time to do? What would be your dream if you could just go do anything? And they look at me with this deer in the headlights stare, and they don't know. And I say, well, have you always wanted to paint? Have you always wanted to dance? Have you want to learn a language? I mean, what? And they kind of go, well, I really don't know. And they are completely lost. The thought of it is lost. And so I think it's a shame that I think if women knew more about menopause, they could plan for this time when they can go do whatever they want. I mean, they could say, well, when I become menopausal and the kids leave home, I'm going to go to a cooking school in France or whatever. And it can be anything that gives them joy. But instead, women are finding themselves kind of lost and trapped with nothing to do, or they're finding themselves following their children, moving out of state, and trying to create a life from the same thing that they've kind of outgrown.
From the past.
Yeah, from the past. You create your future from your future, not from your past. And most women don't think that way. And I just think, wow, it's your turn. Go do whatever you want. I think it's the greatest time in your life. But of course, I call myself Menopause Taylor too.
So, but if we come back to the clinical aspect of it, because that's great, you've got menopausal zest, but in my experience, a lot of women don't have that zest simply because they're in a state of deficiency.
Yep.
So then you hear I'm too tired.
Yep.
I'm not that interested. The motivation is not there.
Exactly.
The memory is not there. The, the desire for sex is not there. I mean, it's just a blah.
It's a vicious cycle.
So when you come now and say, oh, you need to have menopause zest and go around the world or do what you've always wanted to do, the woman is thinking, I don't, like you said, they don't know what their dream was because it's long gone.
Yep.
And to try to conjure it up is just too much effort.
Exactly. Well, but any hormone deficiency would make you feel defeated like that. I mean, if you didn't have thyroid hormone, you'd feel the same lack of energy. You'd be
dragging.
You would not. Exactly.
Overweight.
Exactly.
And
same with insulin deficiency. Exactly. And so what's the difference? You wouldn't just say, well, I'm going to go the rest of my life without these hormones and feel dumpy for the rest of your life. You would replace those hormones and then go, oh, now I feel wonderful. I can go do whatever I want. But see, there is a different perception for hormones for menopause, and there shouldn't be, because women who aren't taking HRT or are not taking adequate HRT will have symptoms of estrogen deficiency. When I have my consultations with women and we talk about what should they take, how much they need, I say, listen, nobody can tell you what you will need. Run from anyone who tells you the name of a product. Just run. No one else knows what you need.
One size does not fit all.
Never. But here's the key. Our bodies talk to us, and they do a beautiful job of letting us know what our bodies need. And no opinion matters but your body's. Your brain's opinion doesn't matter, but your body's does. And here's how simple your body makes things. If your body has enough estrogen, you will have 0 symptoms of estrogen deficiency. It's that straightforward. It makes all the sense in the world. If you have enough estrogen, your cholesterol and lipids will all be stable. And if you have enough estrogen, you won't lose any bone. That's the way your body talks to you. And if your body is saying, hey, I don't have enough estrogen, it doesn't matter what you think about the dosage. It doesn't matter what product you prefer. It doesn't matter. All that matters is what works for your body. You would do the same thing with insulin. You would not say, well, I don't want to take more than this, or I don't want to take it because, my girlfriend said this. You would just take the hormone because you know your body needs it. And so that's how menopause management is. If you choose to take hormones, your body has to be your guide.
Right. And I want to come back to something that you mentioned earlier about women need to take a more active or proactive role without sounding like a woman's liber. Because if you look at the studies that are done, the science that is done, nobody's taking time to look at menopause because women are not demanding it. Perhaps if there was more information and data, and then the magazines and the morning shows and everybody was talking about it, maybe then women would be able to get more information or more interest in the subject.
Exactly.
I read an article just a couple weeks ago, the latest journal of the JAMA Neurological Journal. And these guys had put an article out where they did SPECT testing. SPECT testing is an imaging of the brain on women who took hormones and women who didn't take hormones. And they showed that there was more deposition of tau and amyloid, which are the proteins that deposit in the brain in Alzheimer's condition. They showed that women who took hormones within 5 years of menopause had less of these substances being deposited in their brain.
Mhm.
I mean, that should be on the front page.
Right.
You know, that's earth-shaking. I mean, this
Right.
was literally, this is not someone thinking about it or going back and
Right.
looking at numbers. This is actual pictures of
Yep.
women's brains
Yeah.
that showed this as a fact.
Yeah. Well, but I think I love studies like that that prove something, but I think it's almost I don't think you even need a study like that to tell you this. Here's why. Number one, think of all the women who describe foggy brain, fuzzy brain, menofog, difficulty concentrating, tip of the tongue syndrome, whatever you want to call it, at the time of menopause. Why does that happen? Well, it happens because your brain is covered with estrogen receptors, and those estrogen
That are not
receptors are like,
being fed.
well, it's like they're like parking spots for estrogen. So that means that estrogen is a fuel for your brain. And when those parking spots are empty, your brain is running on fumes. That's why you suddenly can't concentrate. Okay, so your brain is telling you that it doesn't have its fuel. Secondly, twice as many women have Alzheimer's at every single age than men. Ding, 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 ding. Men never lose all their testosterone. We lose all our estrogen at every age. If you look at anything that says why do more women have Alzheimer's than men, most of them will say it's because they live longer. No, it's not. At
No, it's
every
not.
single age. So it would only be true if elderly women had more Alzheimer's than men, if it had to do with aging, how long we live. That's not true. At age 60, twice as many women have Alzheimer's. At age 65, twice as many. Okay, it's because we lose our estrogen. Those two
Right.
things alone let you know the effect of estrogen on your brain. The studies are great. I don't know why people need proof of things that are so obvious in the first place. The problem with common
think-
sense is it's not very common.
It's not very common. My grandfather used to say that. But I think people need the studies because
Yeah.
they have to have something to counter
Yeah.
what the drug companies are telling them, what the media is telling them. And when you have irrefutable evidence,
Yeah.
then maybe we'll make some progress.
Right. That's very
You
true.
and I, having seen women for the last 30 years,
Oh, I know.
we know, I mean, we could
Oh.
recite all the symptoms, wake us up in the middle of the night, and fatigue, anxiety, heart palpitations, sleep, just on and on.
Exactly.
Every single cell in your body
You
has
got
a
it.
receptor for progesterone and estrogen.
Yeah.
And yet, even the eyeball.
Yeah.
So, folks come in, I've got dry eye, I've got this, I've
Yeah.
got that. Had a lady the other day, her mouth was so dry.
Yeah.
In the mornings, she has to peel back her cheek off of her teeth.
Oh my goodness.
And she had been going to the dentist and they've been giving her this and doing that. And she saw the oral surgeon. And, after a year of saying it's your hormones,
Yeah.
she finally said, okay, let
Yep.
me try it.
Well, here's the other thing. You and I both know that there is no education on menopause in medical school. And in
No.
a 4-year OB-GYN residency program, less than 1% of the time is on menopause. So what you have here is a situation where doctors don't know about this stuff. I get doctors in my consultations all the time. Last week I had a
Absolutely.
doctor, a female doctor, and her husband was a doctor, and they were in a consultation with me because her menopause hit and they had no idea what was going on. And so this is what we have to understand is that it is the most neglected topic on earth by everybody.
Everyone.
And that is a big problem with women wanting to be silent about it and doctors not learning about it. These women who have these symptoms are running to 10 and 15 doctors for their 10 and 15 different symptoms, when in
Right.
fact they have only one thing wrong with them, a hormone deficiency. And the doctors don't recognize it as all one thing. They each treat each symptom differently in their department, but they don't realize that, no, it's not a mouth problem. And there's nothing wrong with this woman's mouth. She
Right.
doesn't have estrogen. You see, this is the problem where people don't connect the dots because they don't have the education with which to do so.
Well, the nice thing about educating a doctor is that maybe it'll have a
Oh.
snowball effect, and that doctor will help others to realize what the issue is.
Exactly.
But my one patient with the dry mouth, the funny thing is, she went back to her oral hygienist and said, "This is what I'm taking," and this is what she was so excited. So the oral hygienist was like, and she had watched her for the last year and a half with this problem and no solution.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Well, what are you taking?" Guess who called me the next day? The hygienist herself was like, "I couldn't believe the difference."
Exactly. Well, see, and that's the thing. Well, you know, I'm in the process of making educational products for professionals.
That's wonderful.
Each different professional. So I'm making menopause education resources for physical fitness people and education people, because they don't know anything. Think about all the women who go to a trainer for the first time at menopause when they're gaining weight. Well, the trainer knows nothing. The trainer does everything wrong and hurts the menopausal woman. I'm doing the same for dietitians and nutritionists. Same thing. Think of all the women who go to a dietitian and nutritionist for the first time at menopause, and these professionals know nothing. And you cannot
Therapist, please. Therapist, please.
Yeah, well, psychotherapists and psychiatrists, physical therapists, pharmacists who know nothing, fitness people, nutrition and dietitian people. No, all of these professionals who help menopausal women, they don't have any education on menopause. None of them. And that's the problem. So I'm making resources for each one individually according to their industry only. And each education has to differ because it has to target a whole different subset of people with different professional backgrounds, and they've got different scientific backgrounds. So just as I adjust the way I teach for laypersons, I will adjust the way I teach for all these professionals for whom they have a different kind of education, but they still need a menopause education. So yeah, I'm busy.
Menopause Barbie, I take my hat off to you. That's a great thing, because our own community is so ignorant about menopause, so ignorant. And it's not just doctors at large, it's gynecologists.
Oh, absolutely.
It's endocrinologists. It's the people that you would normally think you could go to about hormone deficiency.
Exactly.
And I always say to patients, if you think about it, most of your symptoms of menopause is above your belly button. That should tell you something. Messing around with your internal organs is not going to change it.
That's right.
It's not going to change the hot flashes. It's not going to change your mood. It's not going to change how you think. So one of the goals of my podcast, switching subjects altogether here, is reinvention. Tell us a little bit of how you reinvented yourself, because your day job as a doctor ended quite a while ago, if I read correctly.
Yes. It's interesting, I don't know. I think it started all the way back to when I was 5 years old because I was a cross-eyed kid. And my father was in the military, and we lived in Taiwan when I was 5 years old. And I don't know what happened.
Were you really cross-eyed, or you were just...
I was cross-eyed. No, I was a cross-eyed
You had
kid.
strabismus.
I had strabismus, yeah. And I don't know what I said, but somehow my parents realized that it was a problem for me or whatever. And my father decided to take me to Okinawa, Japan for surgery on my eyes. And so as a 5-year-old, my father and I remember getting on this airplane and going to Japan and going to a hospital for the first time, and the strange smells and the strange place and people and everything seemed so odd to me. And I had this eye surgery, and I had to wear these patches on my eyes for about 2 weeks afterward, and my father and I flew back to Taiwan. And there's two things that are always true about a cross-eyed person. Number one, when you're cross-eyed, you have no depth perception.
I hate to say it, but you see things differently.
You see everything. The whole world is different because everything is right in front of your face because you have no depth perception. You don't know that one thing is behind another and there's distance between things. Everything is right there, and everything is double. So as a cross-eyed kid, your brain is constantly working to filter out what's reality, because you realize somewhere along the way that what you're seeing is not the way things really are. I mean, at some point, you realize that, wow, the way the world appears to me is not the way it appears to everybody else. And when they say it's farther away and nothing's farther away from me, I realize, wait a minute, something's wrong. So I had this eye surgery. When the patches came off, I couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, I thought they had performed magic, because for the very first time in my life, I saw the world as it really was, with depth perception and space, and suddenly my brain was not so cluttered with everything right here just bombarding me at once. And I mean, it was like this wonderful new awakening. Well, that was when I decided I wanted to be a surgeon, because I wanted to create magic like my surgeon had. So I spent my whole life deciding I'm going to be a surgeon, and I did everything and became a surgeon and went into OB-GYN, and I had my dream life, because I had one of the biggest OB-GYN practices in the largest medical center in the world, and I was thriving and loving every bit of it, and just had the life of my dreams. And then in 2001, I was diagnosed with a very severe form of arthritis that interfered with my ability to continue the life of my dreams, and so I had to retire and sell my practice. Well, so here I had the dream life, doing exactly what I wanted to do, and another disease wiped that out. Well, I didn't really know what to do. I guess I really didn't know how to manage having done everything to have the life I wanted, and suddenly it was all gone. But when I think about it, it is what made it possible for me to do what I'm doing now. And when I had my big practice in the Texas Medical Center, I had 8,000 patients. Well, now I'm able to reach hundreds and thousands of women around the world. I'm able to make a huge difference, much bigger than I could have before. Of course, I miss doing surgery. I miss all the things I love, but physically, my body couldn't do that stuff anymore. I ended up with a physical impediment that changed all that. So the way I see it is, I guess there's two big reasons that I'm able to do what I do, and I think it's why I want to do something so badly. It's because I've already had my first dream taken away from me, and now I feel like, well, by golly, I'm going to do something about this. I want to contribute, and I want to do something for women, and now I found a way that I can do it that is physically capable. And so I know I'll do this for the rest of my life, and I love every single second of it, whether I'm doing consultations or whether I'm creating a video or whether I'm talking to you, all of it. All of it. I feel like I have a purpose. I get to help women all over the world. And I'm the only person on the planet who teaches about menopause, purely teaches. And so I teach. I write books. You do. But
I don't have the kind of time that you have that you can actually dedicate to that.
Right.
That one subject.
Right. And that's the difference. Most people in our industry are practicing, and practicing takes most of your time. And in a 10-minute office visit, you cannot teach to the same extent. If that's the difference. This is a big education. It's a great big education. It's not a 5 or 10-minute soundbite. And that's especially true if you go through 50 years of your life not knowing the first thing about your reproductive tract. You've got a lot of catching up to do. And so The fact that I focus only on teaching, it's a privilege. I absolutely love every second of it. And so I guess I have reinvented myself. I never really thought of it that way. I've always thought of it as just trying to do the thing I set out to do in the first place, but a different way.
And how did menopause fall into all that?
Well, I was in the big Texas Medical Center where there are 150 obstetrician gynecologists. 150.
Wow.
There was not one single menopause clinic. There was not one single person who specialized in menopause. And I was the one and only physician who educated my patients about menopause. And the way I did it in my practice, I always had a private solo practice. At age 40, I demanded that the woman spend 1 hour face-to-face with me. And we started the conversation about menopause at age 40. And then every year, I had a whole protocol. And every year, it was more and more and more. So that by the time I just forced the education on them in their time with me for annual visits. And I was the only person who did anything of the sort. And when I retired, I just was left with this big feeling that there was a huge void in the whole menopause world. And I just thought, well, I want to do something about that void. And so I just started writing my book, and then I created this great big 2-day seminar on menopause. And the problem was I couldn't give the 2-day seminar with my arthritis. It was too hard on my body. I was the whole 2 days. And I would love every minute of it, but my body just couldn't take these 2-day, all day, 7-hour day seminars. And so I found myself kind of perplexed with how to deliver this education and not kill myself doing it. And in January 2016, I was living in Cape Town, South Africa, and I was talking with a girlfriend of mine who's in the US. I said, yeah, I love it. I said to her, I love what I'm doing, but my big passion is the menopause stuff, and I wish I could find a way to actually deliver that education to women. I said, but physically I can't do these seminars. And she started saying, "Oh my God!" I said, "What?" She says, "Oh, Barbie, you need a YouTube channel." To which I said, "What's YouTube?" So it's all just kind of happened because the opportunity has presented itself, and I've just taken the advantage of it and run with it. But I'm not a technologically geared person. I don't know what's out there technologically speaking, and so I'm so thankful that I found this way of doing things, because it has really made all the difference in my ability to deliver this education. But
now, from a personal perspective,
yeah.
How did you experience menopause? Did you
my
have any
own
menopausal issues?
my own menopause was premature and
did
sudden.
it help your arthritis?
No. I had endometriosis, and
Okay.
I had a total hysterectomy and both ovaries and fallopian tubes removed at age 34. So
Oh, you
I
had
had
the switch light menopause,
I had the sudden
like a
and
light switch.
yeah, sudden and early menopause, which both make your menopause much more drastic. So the earlier it is, the more drastic, and the more sudden it is, the more drastic. So I had the most sudden kind of menopause. Well, obviously I was a gynecologist at the time, and so I was able to just give myself what I needed. And I've never had a single symptom of menopause or any issues at all. But now I'm 64, so I've been menopausal for 30 years, and I've done great with it. And
And you look great.
Thank you.
And I love the eyes. There's no sign of cross eyes.
No, not anymore. No, I'm trying to do for menopausal women what I did with my arthritis. I have learned to take my arthritis and turn my negatives into positives. I literally have become an enigma to the medical profession, because my prognosis was that I would be an invalid in a wheelchair. This was 21 years ago. So the fact that I have done so well, and that I'm so functional, and that I'm capable and physically fit and all, no one can figure out how I did that given my horrible x-rays. So in a way, I'm trying to do the same thing for menopausal women with their menopause as I've done with my arthritis, and I've done it with my arthritis and my menopause. So there's some personal knowledge there in addition to my professional knowledge, and that helps too. Having been through all this, I know what can happen. I know what you can do with this.
So let's see if we can recap a little bit here about the benefits of hormone replacement. We've said that there's a massive demographic of women who should consider hormone replacement and would benefit from it, and that the major reasons are health reasons, not symptom, because as you said, a hot flash never killed anyone. But there are definite health benefits that you get from hormone replacement. Most importantly, the risk of osteoporosis is significantly decreased, Alzheimer's is significantly decreased, and the leading cause of death, which we haven't even touched on,
Yes.
which is heart disease.
Absolutely.
Women worry more about cancer than heart disease, and yet 1 in 3 women are going to die from heart disease.
Right.
And women who actually have breast cancer, only 1 in 32 will die from that.
Right.
But we worry.
Right.
So can you give us some take-home messages here?
Well, this is the power of fear. You see, when you think about it, much more attention, much more fundraising, much more money goes into breast cancer. Breast cancer units are the largest units in hospitals. They're huge money makers, and they're governed entirely by fear. Fear runs the whole show of breast cancer. And they keep that train running. I mean, that works. It works for money-making purposes. Heart disease is the biggest killer on the planet. And the problem is you have tons of control in preventing heart disease, but it requires your own effort. It requires diet, lifestyle, exercise, all the things people don't want to have to do on their own. And unfortunately, it's a whole lot of work for most people, even though it shouldn't be a lot of work. I mean, if we had the right kinds of lifestyles to begin with, we wouldn't have an issue here. You know, if you study any traditional culture that still lives in the traditional fashion, it doesn't matter whether it's Eskimos living on whale blubber or, you know, people in Africa living off the land and berries and seeds. If you look at any culture living off of the substances that Mother Nature provided, they have never heard of heart attacks, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, or any of these diseases. We have diseases of civilization, and it's because of the lifestyles we've adopted. I mean, we spend more time in our cars than our kitchen. You know, people don't walk anymore anywhere. I mean, we've gotten this automated world. People don't eat real food anymore. Our food industry has completely corrupted our food. I mean, this is the problem, and we can change all that, but the problem is when the focus is on money, no one wants to change any of that. And so heart disease is the biggest killer on the planet, and yet nobody's really paying much attention to it, and everyone's acting like it isn't their responsibility to avoid heart disease. Well, heart disease is
especially
really
in women, because
especially
when
women.
we do see people talking about heart disease, it's men.
Exactly. And I have seen women go on and on and on about family history. And I always say to them, wait a minute, this isn't about your family. You know, your family history plays a small part of it, but really you have more control than you can possibly imagine. And if you decide to take control, you can prevent all of this stuff. But we don't like accountability. People don't want to hear that something is their responsibility. Generally speaking, people want to blame someone else or something else. I mean, they want a quick fix, they want a pill. They don't want to do the hard work, you know. Every prevention of every disease requires you to play a part. And there are very few diseases that are purely 100% beyond your control. Even genetic predispositions can be swayed by epigenetics, which is how you live your life and how you your diet. So we just don't want to hear that we contributed to our diseases, but that's the truth. Right. It's the truth. We do. We contribute to most of our diseases heavily.
And while we're on the subject of contributing to disease, have you noticed this trend where younger women are having issues with hormone imbalance?
Yes.
Because we've been focusing on menopause and postmenopausal women, but because of the diet and the fake estrogens that you get from plastics and what have you, younger and younger women are having more and more problems with hormone balance, and we haven't even touched on that.
Yeah.
But any younger person that's listening or is having issues or knows a relative or a daughter who has issues, just have them check their hormone situation, because that is also a major factor these days.
Huge.
Like PCOS and
yep.
you know, the bad menstrual cramps or whatever it is.
Yep.
So anyway, I'm not gonna hold you up any longer. It's so wonderful talking to you. And thank you for coming on my first podcast. I really enjoyed talking with you. I hope we can talk again.
We absolutely can. I'm at your service. I loved it. You're wonderful. And I'm just honored to be able to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So thanks for listening to Wellness and Wisdom with me, Dr. Tuakli. And our guest today was Dr. Barbie Taylor, otherwise known as Menopause Barbie. Bye-bye now.